Hello and welcome to Cheshire Audio. Now, this is going to be another Atoll review. I've done a few of these, partly because, well, mainly because actually, I actually think Atoll is probably one of the most significant newcomers to the UK for probably the last 10 years. I mean, I can't think of anything else that has had such a wide range of really good products, really good build quality, really good sound quality, and a company that really cares about what their equipment performs like, really. And sort of still built by enthusiasts, not built by the money men who are trying to churn stuff out. Let's put this feature on, that feature on, that'll sell it if we put Bluetooth on. There's none of that. It's all sticking with the purist sort of way of doing things. I mean, there are options that you can put in there, but generally there's a definite purist sort of way of thinking with Atoll. And they're not a newcomer. I mean, Atoll have been around, forgive me if I've already said this in other reviews, but Atoll have been around for 25 years. It's only recently that they've sort of made inroads into the UK. I mean, they had a few failed attempts with different. It's not so much Atoll as the distribution companies that try and introduce them. But the guys who are doing it at the moment are really switched on. They're really, they're promoting, they're doing shows, they're doing all sorts of things. So, and the backup is really good because I've dealt with them on other things as well. So I know how good they are. So yeah, what I'm going to talk about today is the CD100. £1,200-ish CD player, £1,250, can't remember, something like that. Partly because people keep asking about this, because I've done the little MD100 and vaguely talked about the rest of the range, and I've done a bit with the amplifiers, which are all superb. But the CD100 is interesting because I almost think this is kind of the like gem of the range. It's the one that seems to be the very, very best value, and at that price, it's got no competition from at anything like the price, really. Obviously, you go to the CD200, which is a model up from this. There's a big jump. I mean, that's an amazing player, but it is quite a jump up in price, really. So it's sort of within the realms of not being too crazily expensive. What I've found with people is I've had a lot of people who bought the little MD100, the little half, well, it's MIDI width actually. It's not quite, it isn't half width, it's what they call MIDI width. It's 315, like the old MIDI systems used to be. I've had a few people buying those basically just for something to play the CDs on. They've had a Marantz or they've had an Arcam or something that's fairly decent years ago. They think CD's on its way out, so I don't want to get anything crazy. I'm not going to spend crazy money on this. So they buy the little MD100, and then they'll ring me up and say, this has actually completely changed my view of CD. This thing's wonderful. And sometimes they'll trade it and buy a CD100, or it's funny. I've had quite a few people. I did have one chap who's bought. Actually, I have two people who's done this. MD100, then a CD100, then a CD200, because it's like I'm really into this now. This is fantastic, which is great to see. Actually, I mean, it's CD is not dead. A lot of people who are buying the MD100 and the CD100 and the CD200 are sort of rediscovering CD after sort of going off into the world of streaming, thinking it was okay until they heard one of these. That's not specifically just Atoll. I feel that's the thing with CD generally. I think if you actually don't dismiss it, I think people dismiss it and assume the new technology is better, and it isn't at all. But that's another story. Not go there. Yeah, CD100. Let's focus back onto this. It's competition-wise, it's interesting because it's kind of similarly priced, or it was similarly priced to the Roxanne K3. I actually think the little MD100 is a better sounding CD player than the Roxanne, and that's kind of half the price. This is in a different league entirely. It's much more open. The main thing about the Atoll CD players is that they have a realism and a musicality and a sort of engagement in the sound that you generally don't get with CD until you get into the really big money stuff. Like actually, funny for Roxanne again, the Roxanne Black does it, but it's £3,500. Some of the big name players do, but you're into a 555, well, they don't even make it anymore, but the 555 CD player is one of the best CD players I've ever heard. But if you buy it with the two power supplies, you're up to £20,000, or were. And that was approaching some reasonable sort of record players in quality, I thought. Different presentation, but it had a similar feel and an engagement that some record players had. Atoll, I think, are actually kind of doing it at a much lower price. Not as good as an M555, but there's elements of the sound that let you forget that you're listening to CD. Well, I mean, what I'll do in a minute, I'll take the top off and let you have a look inside, because a lot of people ask about that. Also interesting, I really like Riga CD players, really like them. I was quite upset almost when they stopped making the Apollo, which is coming back, but I mean, that's going to be, might be a year away. When they stopped making the Apollo, and it was partly the reason I took on Atoll, because I needed something to compete with the Apollo, really. Because it was a small player, there was no competition for it. And the Atoll, I thought, well, it's a small player. Then realised it was as good as, or possibly even better than the Riga. A few people who've bought MD100s and had listened to, or even people who've actually had Apollos, prefer the Atoll. I've actually had people preferring the CD100 to the Riga Saturn. Not totally sure I'm with them on that. I think the Riga has got a level of engagement above this, but this is actually very close, and it's 1250 as opposed to 2000. So it's sort of, and it's a front loader as well. So it's doing things it shouldn't for the money, I think, really. I mean, in turn, I must admit, I don't tend to worry about specifications much, but it's a Burr Brown chipset, which I think is the same as Riga. The power supplies are quite interesting on it. Every area, all the digital, the output boards and whatever boards in there all have their own little separate power supplies. So everything is individually fed, which is always a good thing. They're very, very neat inside. I'll open this up in a minute, you can have a look. And it all sort of leads towards the fact that this is going to be a really good sounding player. The 200 is astonishing. It really is astonishing. I mean, if it was £4,000, I wouldn't really think that it was crazy money. I mean, it's a bold statement. This, if it was two and a half, I think you'd get away with it, really. It doesn't look like it's big money. That might be part of the reason why it isn't big money, really, because the casework, it's very simple. There's no sort of frills and flourishes on it at all. It's just a very simple box, squared off. You can black or silver. It does come with remote, which I'll show you in a sec. So it's fairly straightforward. There's nothing special about it visually, but internally that's where all the action is. So hence good value for money, really. And I can't think of any other brand of CD player. There's loads out there. I don't think Rance have got anything that comes close. Audiolab certainly haven't. Who else is out there? People, I don't know. Yeah, there's nothing out there that I've tried. They all have this sort of very sort of bland presentation, I think, really. That was what was so refreshing about Riga, that they were engaging. Technically, they weren't as clear as a lot of the competition, but the engagement was very much like a record player. Atoll seems to give you that engagement, plus a bit more of the sort of hi-fi stuff of the clarity and their separation and all that sort of thing. So yeah, they're very, very special, and I can't sort of say enough about them, really. But at this point, I'll decide I've said enough about them, and what I'll do is turn the camera around, let's have a look inside it, and I'll show you the remote as well. Okay, let's do this in the right order. Let's have a look at the front. Let's have a look at the front panel first. I'll open it up in a minute. Right, as far as the front panel goes, we've got backwards, forwards, track-wise, eject, play, pause, stop, and standby power. The main power switch is on the back, which I'll just do now, because that's what the idea is to leave it switched on if you can, well, within reason, because they do seem to need a bit of warming up. Like a lot of really good players who do. The better the players, the longer they seem to need to warm up, to be honest. So to switch on, now go on to the standby switch. We're on, no disc, obviously. Open. A bit of Taj Mahal. Okay, just like any other CD player, really. Quite a nice draw Mac, actually. I mean, not as slick as some, but it's all right. I mean, it's TIAC based. TIAC generally produce some of the best transports, really. If you remember the old VRDS and things like that. This isn't a VRDS type transport, but it is TIAC. So yeah, track number, time. Very easy, really. Remote is a full system remote. Now, the amplifiers don't. Not all the amplifiers, I'll correct myself, come with a remote control. So if you buy the CD and the amplifier, The amplifier is optional, the CD player comes with it. Now you can, like I say, if you just buy an amplifier, you can buy the remote for it. But this has got everything on it. It's got a remote for the DAC, a tuner, CD, DVD, it says. No, I'm pretty sure they don't do a DVD player. An amplifier. So you've got volume, you've got track select, you've got everything you could ever want on it, really. Does that work? Let me try. Oh, it hasn't got batteries in. Yeah, it has two button cells. And then I've put those in. I tend not to use remotes, so I just box that straight back up again as soon as I've finished. So yeah, that's it. That's as far as functionality goes. Like anything else, a sort of thick brushed aluminium front panel on it, but just a standard sort of bent metal casework around the body of it. It does say Atoll on there, if you can just about catch it in the light there, just above. It's not easy to see. It's easy to see on the silver one, actually. So it's all very subtle. Anyway, let's have a look at the back panel, and then perhaps we might even look inside. Yeah, okay, so back panel. There's the on-off switch I was talking about on the back, so that's out of reach, so you tend to leave it switched on. That's the idea. A lot of companies do that. 3-pin IEC for mains. Then we've got left-right analog out line, so that's where you connect up your standard amplifier. Then we've got a digital out if you want to use an external DAC instead of the internal one, and optical if you want to use an external DAC instead of the internal one. Then there's a mysterious panel there as well, which is quite unusual with Atoll. They do offer an awful lot of options. So you buy the bare bones product, but there's usually options. The CD players, or most of the CD players, have the ability to fit another DAC board in there, which gives you outputs. So this, I think, if you replace this with a DAC board, it gives you 3 outputs of different types. Can't remember what they are, but not being into digital. But it means that you can access the DAC and sort of use it with other things like streamers or whatever you want to use it with, really, which is quite useful, really. I suppose even your TV or whatever, you could use it. Let's take the lid off and have a look inside, because they're quite pretty inside. Okay, so here we are inside. It'll be a quick whiz around it, because my knowledge of the internals of CD players is fairly limited. TIAC transport, like I said, which is a good sign. Fairly chunky power supply. Everything is sort of dual monoed up, really, or apparently is. There's all your output board there. You've got everything left, right. Everything's labelled up as left, right down this side. Big bank of caps. Socket is down there for the optional board, and that's it, really. It's just all the Atoll stuff I've looked inside has all been beautifully neat. Looks quite sparse at first, but until you realise it, it's just so neatly laid out. They're packing in an awful lot of componentry there, and it's just so well arranged. It just doesn't look as busy as some players are just absolutely swarming with components that are dotted randomly all over the place. And this just looks so well designed. Not that I'd know, but it does. To the layman, it looks very well designed anyway. So anyway, let's turn around the camera and so the Atoll CD100. Am I going over the top? I don't think I am, actually. I think it's a very special product. I mean, all of the CD players seem, in their own price categories, to be the best, bar none, really. I've tried so many different players, and there's so many things out there. A lot of manufacturers have kind of lost interest in CD. I think this is a lot of the reason for it. That when somebody comes along who's really spending a bit of time and money on this and wanted to get a really good product with a really good performance, it really stands out. I mean, there's only really Riga who are still concentrating at this sort of price level anyway on CD. There's plenty of manufacturers, funnily enough, you wouldn't have thought it, but further up in the price point. I mean, Exposure have got things going on. Really, some really interesting stuff going on. But most other companies have just shelved it altogether. All the ones who are really good at it seem to have shelved it and have gone into streaming, which I have a feeling, I'm getting a definite feeling with customers now that there's a sort of resurgence back towards other sources, really. An interesting Atoll seems to have driven that for a few people. There's a few people who bought these players, like I said before, as a second or third source just to play some old CDs on. And it's then become, not necessarily number one source, but certainly has moved up ahead of other things, which says a lot, really. Yeah, it's sort of, like I say, people saying it's completely changed my view of CD. what it's about and how I'm going to use it. So that in itself is probably the best place to leave it, really. Anyway, thanks for watching. We're nearly on 8,000 subscribers. I just don't believe it, really. It's getting, the channel has gone mad. Considering it's just me running a shop and occasionally grabbing a camera and doing a video, that's incredible, really, to have that sort of support from people. Thanks very much for that. But yeah, don't have to come do my little spiel. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to give us a like. And I will see you in a future video. Thanks very much.